Right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to my studio. My name is Bill Platz, and I'm going to be presenting the workshop here for you this evening, and I am going to be presenting along with our outstanding models, Rachel and Atticus. Everyone got a chance to meet last week. Rachel and Atticus are two very experienced life models that I've worked with, had the good fortune to work with many times before. Now, before we get started, I'd like to thank Shannon for doing that acknowledgement, and I would also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet tonight, and elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations people wherever you may be joining us from here this evening. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Qagoma's virtual events program and HSBC for sponsoring this series. This is the second in our draw along series here for August, our life drawing series. We'll have one more of these next week, and I hope that all y'all can join us again next Thursday night for our final session on unruly bodies. Now, I'd also like to say that something drastic has changed since I saw all y'all last week, for those of you who were here with me last Thursday, and that is that the Gallery of Modern Art has reopened. GOMA has reopened, which is fantastic. Both the Queensland Art Gallery and Gallery of Modern Art are now open to the public, and you can go visit, and I would encourage you to. And in addition to the museums being open, the GOMA bookstore has put together some special kits and books and things around drawing for you to explore when you're there. So if you go and you visit GOMA, go into the bookstore and you'll see that they've got some things that we've talked about setting up just for drawing. All right, now this evening I'm going to take you through our second session in this series. We're working roughly chronologically. Last week, we went back to the 19th century and we spoke about academic life drawing. We spoke about the way that you measure and plot the body to make a legible and elegant drawing of the body in proportion, with a focus on anatomy, measurement, and position in space. This week, we're going to pivot to something slightly different. In Sudden Bodies, we're going to look at the post-war elevation, if you will, of intuition and responsive drawing, the idiosyncrasies of each individual artist as they respond to the model and the model's movement in space. And the type of responsive drawing that we're going to be exploring tonight is loosely captured under the term gesture drawing. But I find in my experience that gesture drawing sometimes can be quite limited in its application. Oftentimes gesture drawing is thought of as a kind of preliminary sort of drawing, a kind of warm-up drawing that one does before one gets on to the real drawing. And we're going to take it out of that framework of a kind of conditioning, a warm-up exercise. And instead, we're going to look at gesture drawing and this kind of sudden and immediate drawing as an end in and unto itself. All right, now, as we get into this evening, you're going to want to work with a few different materials. Hopefully everybody has their paper all set up, and you'll see me drawing on my sheet of paper over here. Whatever type of paper you have, whatever size is going to work. The bigger the better, we always say, but whatever you have. I know I got some wonderful feedback last week from people who are using their willow charcoal, but then trying to draw on A4 sheets of paper and saying it's very difficult to draw with willow at that small scale, and that's true. But whether you've got pencil, whether you've got textures, whether you've got charcoal, whatever you have, get those materials ready, and we will dive right in. Now, you'll see me this evening drawing with willow charcoal, which is the same material I was using last week. It is just a pure carbon. It is a charred wood, a piece of willow, and that's what I'll be drawing with. But if any of you out there, I'll also be showing you a really nice little technique that's a bit of an extra. If any of you out there listening here this evening also have a bottle of ink hanging around, and I've got a little bottle of black ink right here, a really nice technique that you can use with your willow charcoal when you're doing gesture drawing is to dip your willow charcoal into your black ink and draw with the willow, and you'll get a combination of the wet line, the liquid line from the ink, and then the dry line, the friable line from the charcoal, and it gives a really beautiful rhythm to the drawing. So if you have any ink handy, that's fine. I'll also do a little bit of drawing just with a texter, a fiber tip pen tonight too. And a fiber tip pen is a great thing to draw with. You'll see in several of the drawings we're going to look at here in just a moment from the Qagoma collection that fall under this broad rubric of gesture. You'll see a number of them are done in pen and ink. And the wonderful thing about pen and ink is it forces you to be immediate. You can't go back, you can't be fussy, you can't erase. You just got to dive in there and make your marks on the sheet of paper. So if you have a marker or a texter handy, that's really great to use tonight too. All right, so we're going to dive right into it now and start talking about gesture, and we're going to get into and start doing our first couple of drawings here this evening. Now, before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about a few drawings that are in the Qagoma collection, and I want to have a look at a few of these drawings and talk about some of the qualities of these drawings that you can see. Now, I'd like to remind everybody that we're not actually going to be drawing from these drawings. If you were in my previous workshop in June, we were actually using the drawings as subject matter to draw from. Tonight, we're going to be drawing from Atticus and Rachel. So I'm going to use these drawings just to talk through some of the issues in gesture drawing and the sudden body, but we're not actually going to draw from them. All right, so I'm going to flip it over now so everybody can see these drawings on screen. And as you see each one of these drawings, I'm going to talk a little bit about about the strength of them as gesture drawings. So this first one, a wonderful pencil and crayon drawing here by Anne Weinholt, an artist who from Australia, but lived and worked for many years in America, actually studied at the Art Students League in New York and then settled in California. But I'd like you to look at this drawing and just look at the beautiful line work. Again, when you have a line that denotes the edge of something, we call that a contour line. And you see that beautiful contour line and how immediate it is. It's got that sense of spontaneity. There's no underlying structure. There's no searching lines. There's no mapping or diagramming as we talked about last week. Now you just see this artist going right in and capturing that subject matter. You see here also what we refer to as economy, right? A very economical line, that it's not overdrawn. There's not a lot of information, but it's very economical information. All right, if we go on to the next one, you'll see this beautiful little drawing by Edouard Vuillard. Vuillard is another really interesting artist, French artist, one of the founding members of a group called the Nabis, the Prophets, at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. Here's an excuse to go to the Queensland Art Gallery. They've got one of the biggest, most beautiful Vuillard paintings I've ever seen in my life there. But this, you see in this beautiful little sketch, what we call a croquis, in French, C-R-O-Q-U-I-S, a quick sketch. It's gestural, it's immediate, and I'm going to keep saying that word over and over again, immediacy. It's a direct response to something. It's done very rapidly, but we're not going to get caught up in just the rapid line, because as we talk about gesture tonight, we're also going to talk about slow line and how slow line can also be a gestural line. All right, if we flip on to the next one, here, great Francis Limburner work that you see right here. And in this Francis Limburner work, again, pen and ink with some wash. Limburner was an artist who, from Brisbane, an artist who actually taught at the same school where I teach, the Queensland College of Art at Griffith University, prior to it being called the Queensland College of Art or joining Griffith University. Limburner also taught there. And you can see here this, again, immediacy, right? This quick line that captures so much of the mood, right? It's not just describing the figure, but it's capturing the mood, the tension, the connotations in that figure. All right, if we go to the next one. Here, again, I'll just show this to you really quickly, this Melville drawing, because it's, again, a beautiful drawing in the Qagoma collection. But I want you to look at that line, and again, the economy of that line, that contour line, and how it's not concerned with anatomy. You can see that the upper arm's relationship to the elbow and the lower arm, it's out of proportion here, pretty wildly out of proportion, but it's not about a kind of anatomically accurate description. It's about the attitude, the mood, the gesture in space of that body. All right, if we go to the next one now, these last two artists are the two that I really want to focus on and have you think about and put into the back of your mind as we go through this, this workshop here this evening. John Mulvig, a lot of you might be aware of Mulvig's work because the Queensland Art Gallery had a big show of his work just at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, the John Mulvig Maverick show. And I hope everybody had a chance to see that because it was a beautiful show. And this drawing was in that show. And I remember this drawing very vividly and seeing it there. And I hadn't seen this drawing previously. But this reclining figure, again, that really, really strong, really essential contour line that shows everything. You get the sense of mood, you get the sense of space, you get the attitude, you even start to feel the psychology and the emotion within this. And that's something that you can do with very little information with these gestural lines, really beautiful gestural lines. And then the next Mulvig, you'll see the exact same thing here. Again, in this reclining figure. It doesn't really matter that you see, like in the arm, that it's a quick wavy line. It doesn't get bogged down in trying to show the skeletal structure, all of the musculature. Instead, it's about the attitude and showing the immediacy of the figure in space. And the last artist that I want to look at briefly is Laura Knight, Dame Laura Knight. If you don't know Laura Knight, you should. She is a very, very important 20th century artist. She was the first woman admitted to the Royal Academy in London as a full member. She was also the very first woman to ever have a retrospective exhibition at the Royal Academy. So she broke down a lot of barriers as a woman and an artist in the 20th century, especially in the big institutions and official institutions like the Royal Academy. She was a brilliant painter, brilliant draftsperson too. And so again, you look at the line here and how much information is carried with the economy of line and that beautiful lyrical line that works across in this very, very quick pencil sketch. And in the next drawing, you'll see the exact same thing. You'll see more of the figure here. And again, this sort of this prancing, dancing figure with the drapery, and how much information and how much of that gesture and movement is captured with relatively little information. Now, this is what we're really going to focus on tonight, is we're going to focus on how to use your line and how to use your contour to capture that intuitive and immediate kind of drawing. All right, let's come back to me now, and let's come back to our models here for this evening. Thanks very much. All right, so when we get into the gesture drawing, oftentimes, if you've ever been to a life drawing class, a recreational life drawing workshop or class or any of those things, you'll start out with gestures, as I said a few minutes ago. And they can be as short as 10 seconds. They can go up to 30 seconds, a minute. But the whole idea is that you're working really frantically and quickly trying to get down these energetic lines on the sheet of paper. And oftentimes, the models are taking crazy energetic poses, and the artists are working really quickly to try to capture that dynamism and the energy. And that's an interesting thing because it brings the idea of movement into kinetics, into the idea of life drawing. Typically, models are asked to do a very strange kind of performance called posing, where they adopt a classical pose like we talked about last week, and they try to stay perfectly still for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I've had professional models who can hold a pose for over an hour in the past. But of course, we understand that that's not the way the body works. The body is never static like that. The body is always in motion, always in movement. And gesture drawing was about bringing the action and movement back into the body. Now, one of the misunderstandings of gesture drawing is that thus all gesture drawing has to be rapid and frantic. And it doesn't. Gesture drawing can be quite slow, but still capture that immediacy of the figure. And you'll hear me say that word over and over again, immediacy. And I mean that not only as the immediate, response to the figure on your sheet of paper, but in the philosophical sense of the immediate as something which is not based in reason, but based in intuition. And we're very much going to be talking this evening about responsive drawing, the way that you're going with your gut, your intuition, and then as the drawing's developing, you're responding to what's happening in that drawing, letting it grow organically rather than trying to control it in an academic or ideal sense, as we did last week. All right, so let's talk about this. And again, as we talked about academic values last week, this is not about superior drawing or inferior drawing or saying that one set of values is better than another. It's just different systems, different methods of approaching the figure that will give you as artists very different kinds of results and responses. All right, so we're going to begin this evening with a drawing which we're actually going to take a little bit of time with. So we're going to get out of that idea that gesture drawing is something which is going to be this frantic 30-second kind of dump, onto your sheet of paper. Instead, we're going to step back. We're going to take our time, but we're going to really try to feel the contour of the body and work very, very responsively and intuitively with that contour to grab the figure on the sheet of paper. Now, one of the important things that I always emphasize when doing this kind of gesture drawing is to give yourself a frame to work within. And this is an old trick in drawing. Oftentimes, if you're confronted with a giant sheet of paper like this, you can get quite lost in where you are in space. And one of the things that all of those gesture drawings I showed you from the Qagoma collection have in common is they're beautiful compositions. The way that those drawings interact with the sheet of paper is really dynamic. And so one of the things I recommend doing before you start is give yourself a drawing frame. Oftentimes I find that people, when they start drawing, they get very afraid of the edges of their sheet of paper. And so they'll always tend to push and collapse towards the center of their sheet of paper. And one way that you can defeat that is just give yourself a frame to begin with. And typically, if you have a drawing frame, laid out on your sheet of paper, you'll be much more willing to push and work within that frame rather than working in such a way that you don't ever get near those two edges. So as you're drawing, to begin with this time, what I'd like you to do is take your sheet of paper and take with your pencil, your charcoal, whatever you have, and just give yourself a frame, all right? So just 4 lines, and that will denote your format, okay? And let that sit there on your sheet of paper. Then as you do your drawing, work within that frame, but think about how all of your lines are relating to that frame. There's an old adage in drawing I mentioned in my last series of workshops, which is that every drawing begins with 4 lines: the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. Everything else relates to those 4 lines. All right, so let's begin with a quick drawing here, relatively quick drawing. We'll go about 3 or 4 minutes. We're going to do a gesture drawing. We're going to do a contour drawing. And in a contour drawing, we're just going to let our tool follow the contour of our model's bodies. All right, we're going to have our models get up and take a pose, and we're going to work through it. Now, you don't have to draw their entire body. You can bring it in, you can crop, you can isolate one of them or the other. You can draw just Atticus or just Rachel. That's going to be up to you. There's a trick that's sometimes used that some of you might have used before yourselves, which is called a blind contour, where you don't even look at the models. I'm sorry, scratch that. You don't look at your paper. You only look at the models and then draw. And one of the reasons that you do that is you're trying to become very sensitive to the peculiarities of this particular pose, rather than getting into your rational, reasonable mind and thinking, this is an arm, this is a leg, this is a hip, this is a breast. But we're not going to do that. We're not going to work blindly. I want you to actually look at the model and look at your own drawing. But in about 3 or 4 minutes, we're going to try to work a contour drawing, just like those that I showed you a few minutes ago, the Melville drawing, the Weinhold drawing, etc. A contour drawing in space, all right? Now, try to avoid, for this first drawing, a lot of really rapid scrubbing of your paper. Instead, try to really look and study the figure and work around in a really organic but still fairly loose manner. All right, so let's have Atticus and Rachel, let's have you guys stand up. We'll do a start with a standing pose. And we'll go about 3 minutes. So let's take a pose that you can hold for about 3 minutes with a little bit of movement in it. All right, there we go. All right, now, again, you can draw one, you can draw both. That's up to you, and you can bring it in. So for this particular drawing, since I've got a good view of Atticus, I'm a little blocked from Rachel there. I'm going to start with Atticus. And unlike last week when we were laying out our armature and bringing in all of our structure, now I'm just going to begin with that contour. I'm going to begin with his head and just start working my way around that contour of that body. And I want you to do the exact same thing. Don't worry so much about keeping it all perfect and in proportion. Try to think about, again, the little peculiarities that are happening in that pose. I'm working around. I'm seeing a slightly different view than y'all are seeing there on the camera. And I'm thinking also about the way that this is intersecting with my frame. Now, you can work inside the form. Don't feel like you only have to do just the exterior contour. You can certainly work contours that are inside too. And a good trick while you're working, whatever tool you're using, whether it's a piece of charcoal, a pencil, texture, whatever it is, that texture in your fingers. And if you spin that texture in your fingers, you'll actually get some variety in the line that you're using. All right, I'm just going to keep working there. And the whole idea here is to be really, really just responsive. Think about the way that the drawing is developing, what interests you in the drawing. Don't worry so much if the arm isn't exactly the right length, the leg isn't exactly the right length, or if you cut off the head. Don't worry about any of those things. All right, keep going. Another minute. Our models are wearing their COVID masks again, which gives you a nice graphic anchor there in the head. There were so many good drawings last week. Typically, when people first start drawing, they don't pay any attention to the head because they get a little bit intimidated by it. There were so many good drawings of the heads last week that I think when I go back to teaching in my life drawing classes, I'm going to always have the models wear face masks like this because it made people very sensitive to it. All right. There we go. And if you want to just change something, just draw right over it. Don't worry about erasing or anything like that, and lay out your drawing there. All right, I'm going to move over to the other side so you can keep drawing. And I'm checking my watch. All right, and let's cut it there. Now, thank you very much, Atticus and Rachel. Excellent. All right, hopefully that first contour went really well for you. Now, last week there were a few issues. I should make a brief disclaimer. There were a few issues with the aspect ratio of the video that we were broadcasting. We're broadcasting this video at 16:9 aspect ratio, and this week we changed it up so we're broadcasting it in high def, which is something we didn't do last week because we were a little bit afraid of the upload and download speeds for y'all. But I think not doing it in high def actually made on some people's devices the image get a little bit squashed. It got squashed into a 4:3 format instead of 16:9. So we're broadcasting in 16:9. Hopefully nobody's having any issues on your end as it comes out the other end. We've done a lot of testing of it this week, but know also that Qagoma is recording this session, and they will be uploading this session to the Qagoma YouTube channel too. So hopefully nobody's having any trouble with your device. But if you are, please still follow along. Having elongated bodies is not going to get in the way this week at all as we do gestural drawing, and you will have a chance to come back and see that video when it's uploaded on the YouTube as well. All right, now, as you're thinking about this drawing and as you're looking at the drawing that you just created, I want you to think about a couple of things here. Think about the personality. Again, and the word I used was idiosyncrasy before. One of the things that academic drawing sought to do was to create a kind of homogenized drawing where all drawings had the same sort of aesthetic values and the same ideals of the body. One of the reasons that in the post-war era, gesture drawing has been so adopted as an expressive method of drawing is because it makes us consider the drawing on its own terms, in terms of the marks that are made and in terms of what it says about the artist who's making the drawing. The thing that I always say about life drawing, the great secret of life drawing, is that life drawing is not about the model's body. Life drawing is about your body as the artist because you're the one who's doing the drawing. It's you who's doing the looking. It's your body that's moving to make the drawing. The model's bodies are references, but what fascinates us about drawings is the way that we see the artist's relationship with their own bodies evolving through those drawings, their understandings of the body. All right, so that first one was a good start. All right, that was a little bit to get us going. Now, we're going to make it a little bit more complicated this time, and I'm going to point out one other aspect of figure drawing that can really help you. Here's a little tip, and I'm going to actually use Atticus as a demonstration for this. If Atticus holds his arm out straight there to the side so you can see it, one of the things that you'll perceive when you look at the model's arms is that it is in some places convex, and in other places it appears concave. Right? Convex, bowing out, concave, bowing in. Thanks very much, Atticus. One of the secrets of the human body is that all of our muscles are actually convex. And what we have is with our muscles, we have one convex curve overlapping another convex curve, overlapping another convex curve. And where we see the concavity is the skin stretching between two muscles. Can be fat, can be skin, but it's always stretching between. So if Atticus holds out his arm again, what you actually have there, as you can see, is you've got the curve of his deltoid, right, which is a convex curve. You have the curve of his bicep, which is a convex curve. And then it seems like there's a concave dip in between, but that's only because of those two intersections. And one of the things that you'll see, thank you very much, Atticus. One of the things that you'll see if you start studying drawings and people who have a lot of experience of drawing is that you'll see that they're always massing together these convex forms. So it's a convex form and another convex form and another convex form, and the concavities fall between them. If in gesture drawing you start to do really loose sort of noodly lines, you're actually going to lose a lot of the dynamism of the body. So one thing that you can practice in this next drawing is thinking about always bringing a convex form and then overlapping another convex form and overlapping another one. And if we were going to stretch our skin, the skin would start to give the sense of a concave form, but that's only because it's stretching in those different ways. And as you become more sensitive to it, you'll actually be able to do very, very loose drawings, but loose drawings that still have structure to them. It's still where you feel the dynamic of the body. So that's a little tip that you can try, is by massing together those convex lines. So let's try this again. Let's flip it over. You got a fresh sheet of paper. All right. And we're going to do a different type of drawing this time. This time, we're going to do a drawing where we're massing the line very, very quickly, but we're working around the drawing slowly. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean is that you're going to be massing the line very, very quickly, but working across the entire body slowly. So again, rather than trying to work the entire body in big sweeping motions, you're going to be massing lines. So moving your hand relatively quickly, but massing those lines in small areas. So massing the lines around Rachel's shoulder, around the breast, around the thorax, around the abdomen, working relatively quickly, but in those small areas. So last time we did the contour working around, this time we're going to be massing lines. And what you're going to try to do is build up some density. And the density of lines that you create is going to be mirrored in the density of the experience of this drawing. All right, now we're going to do this. It's going to be a short pose again. We're going to go about 3 minutes. We're going to have Rachel and Atticus. They've got a little length of rope here. And they're actually going to grab this little length of rope and they're going to pull against each other. So you'll have that inherent tension that you can work with there too. So you'll be able to, again, draw one of them, draw both of them, that's up to you. And again, if you want to, give yourself a little bit of a frame that you can work within so you can start to feel the composition of what you're drawing. All right, and watch what I'm going to do and then we'll get started. So as I see Atticus now, as I'm looking across there, what I'm going to do now this time is working really quickly. Let's say it's working up into his head, and I'm going to mass my line really quickly, and I'm going to work these convex forms, massing these forms out, and it's going to get quite dense very, very quickly, this drawing. All right, as you mass those lines, but you're massing them in small areas all at once rather than massing them across the entire figure. We're going to do that for 3 minutes, massing those lines, bringing density, but trying to work again in a convex motion rather than a concave motion, and overlapping those convexities over and over and over again. All right, let's go 3 minutes. Let me check my watch. All right, there we go. 3 minutes, and let's begin. Go for it, y'all. Now, as you're massing, if you start to get a little bit lost, don't worry about it. Just keep going, keep moving forward, and piecing that drawing together. And again, part of what you're trying to do here is get a sense of all of this density of line, which is giving that internal movement and dynamism of the figure. Okay? And you can see as I'm drawing, always working in these convex lines, never letting it slip inside and going concave with it. So I keep doing that everywhere and just overlapping one over another over another. And again, you can draw inside the form too. It doesn't have to stay just on the outside. All right, and just there it goes. And hopefully you should be getting a really nice dense drawing, whether you're working in pencil or whether you're working in charcoal or whether you're working in pen, whatever you have. You should be getting a lot of material down there on the sheet of paper. And again, work with your compositional frame. If you laid that out ahead of time, think about how that body is fitting into that compositional frame too. All right, keep it quick, keep it loose. You've got about another less than a minute, okay, to go there. And keep thinking about how every one of those movements that you see, as you see Rachel's body leaning back that way, you can start to see all of those curves continuing to go. Again, always going with those convex lines rather than concave lines and building up that density. All right, I'll try to stay out of y'all's way here. Another few seconds. Nice pose, y'all. All right, and we're out. All right, how did that one go for everybody? Hopefully that went well, thank you. How did you guys do with that one? All right, good. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next drawing. I know we're gonna keep these, part of my strategy here this evening is to keep changing these drawings up and keep going through each one. Part of that strategy is so that you can get out of your head of being too judgmental and saying, oh, is it right? Is it good? Instead, you're just working intuitively, working relatively rapidly from drawing to drawing. But again, trying to capture that sense of immediacy, the immediate encounter between you and the model, which is recorded there on your page. All right, so let's go on to the next one. All right, now for the next one, wet my whistle. All right, for the next one, if you have access to a pen, whether it could be a biro pen, could be some of the most beautiful biro pen drawings William Dobell did just watching TV and doing drawings, quick gestural drawings from the television screen. It's a bit like what y'all are doing here this evening. So whether you have a biro pen, whether you have a texture, whether you have a marker, dry erase marker, one of your kids' school markers, any of those things will work. All right, and I've got one right here that I'm going to use. Now, we're going to go over to a pen if you have it. If you just have a pencil, that's fine. But if you have a pen, because now we're going to go back to that contour, but we're going to think now about doing the entire body and spending a little bit more time with the body, but still thinking about this notion of the immediacy, the gestural. One of the things that people often say about the gesture is that it's meant to be expressive. And the way that they think that expressiveness is seen, right, or is visualized is through a lot of motion and a lot of activity, like the drawing we just did. But slow lines, contour lines can be just as expressive, and they can still be gestural lines, immediate lines. And that's what we're going to move on to next with our pen. So let's get another fresh sheet of paper ready to go. Here. I'm just going to flip mine over. Actually, I'm not. Do that. I'll go with a fresh sheet of paper here. All right. And with this next sheet of paper and your marker, we're going to follow the exact same structure again, but we're going to do a slightly more complex pose this time. One of the other ideas of gesture drawing is that it has to be a quote unquote dynamic pose. So the model's got to be doing something which is almost impossible for the model to hold for any length of time in order to do gesture drawing. Or increasingly over the last 30 years, in life drawing courses and groups, there has been movement in the pose. So the models will be moving constantly as the artists are capturing those very rapid movements. This was something that started at the end of the 19th century with artists like Rodin, who used to employ models to just come and just spend the day in his studio. And he would capture them in natural ways, right? So the idea was, rather than having the model pose, he would see a model reading a book or taking a drink, and he would do a rapid sketch of it, right? So that idea of just capturing the model sort of at leisure rather than the really classical pose. There was another 19th century artist, Delacroix, Eugene Delacroix, who once very famously said that you should be able to draw a man falling out of a 4-story window before he hits the ground. And if you can do that, then you can do really good paintings, right? If you can't do that, you'll never do a good painting, right? But going back to Goya, Rembrandt, all these artists that y'all know, they all had this method of working. It could be a quick line, could be a slow line, but it was about getting to that economy and that essence of the model's pose. And that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so I'm going to use my marker here. I'm going to get to the fat end of my marker so that hopefully y'all can see this on your screens there at home. We're going to have Atticus and Rachel this time take a pose where they're seated, or not completely seated, but they're going to be crouching here on the stage, and they're going to be interacting. And so you're going to have a slightly less easily decipherable kind of a pose, right? Because in this pose, you're going to see the combination of them there together, and you're going to have to start to pick out those different movements of the body. And that's what we're going to do. So again, there we go, perfect. Yeah, let's just take a pose with some leaning as well, a little bit of movement or lean. There we go, perfect. All right, good. All right, excellent. Now we're going to hold this. Are you going to be good there on your arm? A couple of minutes? Okay, Rachel's all good. All right, now, again, I recommend give yourself a little bit of a frame. So I'm going to come here on my sheet of paper now, and I'm going to give myself a horizontal frame, what we call a landscape frame, as opposed to portrait, because it's going horizontally. I'm going to give myself that frame so I have, again, a structure to work against. All right, we're going to take a couple of minutes for this pose, and this time what I want you to do is, again, working slowly with your contour line, keeping in mind that idea of the concavity that we talked about just a minute ago, but now trying to think through the tension, think of the movement, think of the attitude, think of all that weight pushing down on Rachel's arm as she leans on the stage. Think about Atticus twisting his body and pulling back that way. And think about how your lines can translate through those different poses. All right, so again, pick a point to start. You're not going to be doing any sort of layout of the anatomy or structure this time. You're just going to respond to their interaction. All right, and working with pen, so you're going to have to be very, very open to whatever happens in your drawing, because you're not going to be able to control that much of it. All right, and what's there is there. And let your pen just find its way around, and be specific again. Try not to be generic with your line, but think specifically about what you're seeing there in the pose and respond to that specificity. And again, a good trick if you're working in any sort of a pen is also to twist that pen in your fingers, and by just rotating it in your fingers, you'll get a variety of different kinds of marks and lines that come through. Responsive drawing is all about, again, letting the drawing reveal to you what's important. It's not about you trying to control or rationalize the drawing. It's letting the drawing happen intuitively, organically. Again, you can do internal detail as well as the external contour. And again, for this kind of gesture drawing, you can see it's not that rapid. It's not about working quickly across the entire surface, but it's about working with a kind of immediacy. And hopefully you'll be a bit surprised at what starts to emerge as important in your drawing. How y'all holding up? Good. Remember what I talked about when showing those other works from the Qagoma collection too, about economy, right? It's about how you can get so much information with relatively economical lines, relatively economical mark making. All right, another minute. Now, as you're going through this too, and as you're getting into this final minute, start to look at your own drawing, think about your own drawing, and start to analyze what seems really important in my drawing. What do I want to amplify? What do I want to bring attention to? So for me, I see this intense intense tension in Rachel's arm coming down against the slackness of her prosthetic chest that she's wearing, that chest piece that she's wearing. And I love that sense of tension. So I'm going to even bring a heavier line in there to really amplify that coming down to her hand. There we go. All right, tick tock, a few more seconds on that drawing. Again, hopefully if you started off with that frame, you'll really start to see how the composition and the way that you've brought those figures relative to that frame works for you. And we're out. All right, Atticus and Rachel, thank you very much. Good pose, Rachel. All right, good. Okay, now we're gonna move on to our next and final type of drawing that we're going to do this evening, which is going to be a masked and overlapped drawing, where we're gonna bring multiple figures into one drawing together, and you're just gonna work one figure on top of another on top of another. So you're gonna start to build density, not with individual lines in a single figure, but you're gonna start to build density and immediacy by bringing multiple figures into one drawing. Okay, now you can go with any sort of a medium that works for you. I'm going to go back over to my Willow charcoal. For those of you who do have some black ink handy, as I mentioned at the beginning, try that method where you actually dip your Willow charcoal into your ink and keep dipping it into your ink as you draw. Your Willow charcoal works as a great dip tool when working with a bottle of ink. So you can try that. All right, I'm gonna go back over to my Willow charcoal and let's get set up for our next sheet of paper. And this time we're going to have Atticus and Rachel do a series of poses. And they are going to take a pose, which they're gonna stop. They're gonna pause and hold for a few beats, probably between 30 seconds and a minute. And then they're gonna move ever so slightly in that pose. And then they're gonna hold again. Then they're gonna move ever so slightly. And then they're gonna hold again. So they're going to take a pose, which they'll hold then for you for probably about 30 seconds. And then they're gonna do just a very gentle movement, and they're gonna hold again. And then they're gonna do another gentle movement and hold again. And what you're going to do is you're gonna start to trace that movement. One of the things that gestural drawing does really beautifully is it builds duration. It builds time into the drawing. You get a sense of the duration. And the sense of duration gives you that sense of immediacy in the drawing too. So we're gonna build that in this time, and we're gonna draw a drawing on top of another drawing on top of another drawing, and you're gonna mask them up on your sheet of paper that way. All right, now we've got a long bar here and a shorter axe handle, which they're going to use for this series of poses. So you'll have some tools in these poses, which you can see. They're going to start with a standing pose, and they're going to take it. Again, they're going to hold, and then they're going to do a very slight movement. And every time they move, you're going to go to the next drawing and overlap those drawings. So let me show you really quickly. I'll do a quick demo for you, and then we'll get into it. Okay, y'all, let's go with that. Careful, that's heavy. You've got the axe handle, good. All right, okay. So they're gonna start with a fairly kind of dynamic pose there, leaning on those bars and things, as you can see there. Again, you can focus on one of them, or you can draw both of them. Now, they're gonna hit that, they're gonna hold that for about 30 seconds, all right? I'm gonna call out the changes. So holding that for about 30 seconds, what you're gonna do then is rapidly, like if I was drawing Atticus, I'm gonna try to capture his entire movement in space there, okay? And I'm gonna not worry too much again about anatomy or proportion or any of those things. I'm just gonna try to catch the feeling that I get of that pose, all right, and what's happening there, all right? And the pull that's going down there past him, where he's holding on. All right, and then I'm going to call out the change, and they're going to do a very slight movement where they just shift their weight a little bit and move a little bit with those tools there. And then we're going to go 30 seconds again. And when they do that slight shift, you're going to draw the next drawing. And as you can see here, I'm just going to move over on my page a little bit to the side, but then I'm just going to overlap that first drawing. All right, so now Atticus's head is there. Shoulders are coming down. Now his arm is pulling across. And I'm going to start to build up density just as I start massing these multiple figures across. And again, I'm going to try this time to work with a rapid, more gestural, action-based line to capture them in space. Okay? That's what we're going to do. Okay, Rachel and Atticus, you can shake it out for just a second, and then we'll begin. All right, I'm going to wipe that back and start over again. So y'all can watch me go through it at the same time you go through it. And I'm going to grab my black ink, and I'm going to do some dipping of my willow charcoal in my black ink as I draw too. And also I'm going to have a sip of coffee. Okay, is everybody ready to go? You guys ready to go? Okay, they're going to hit their first pose. Here we go. All right, everybody, let's begin. If you're working pencil on just a small piece of paper, that's fine. Do the exact same thing. Just keep massing it up. If you're working charcoal on a huge sheet of paper like this, same thing. And I'm going to do my willow charcoal dipped in my ink. All right. My willow charcoal gave up the ghost. Go to another piece. All right, a few more seconds. Again, this is the type of gesture drawing where we're bringing that rapid drawing in. And we'll switch it. Okay, so slight movement, and then just move over on your sheet of paper and go on to the next one. Okay, if you want to mix it up too and draw Atticus, then Rachel, then Atticus, then Rachel, and keep going back and forth, you absolutely can. You've got the length of a TV advert now to get this drawing in there. One of the reasons why we do this type of drawing is as an end in itself, so that you begin to explore different types of mark making and the strength in the different types of mark making you can get when you work in different ways. But another reason is that you start to question what you think makes a drawing quite good. And does it have to be really descriptive in order to be a good drawing of the body? Or can it be a drawing which captures your experience of the pose rather than just what the pose looks like? Let's switch it again. And this is, of course, I'd say, you could say it's the stereotype, maybe even the cliche of gesture drawing, is that gesture drawing is drawing about what the model is doing rather than what the model looks like, right? Now, I think there's some truth in that, except gesture drawing is also about what you're doing, not just what the model's doing. All right. And what you'll wind up with is you're creating rhythm on your paper. And the rhythm that you're creating on the paper is going to be a reflection of the rhythm of these movements of the model's body, but also the rhythm of the movements of your own body. And in that sense, it's also going to be a life drawing. It's going to be a drawing that's derived from the rhythm and movement. Again, it might not be a very satisfying picture for you in terms of a really legible and decipherable picture of the body, but it's just a different value for what can make the drawing profound and strong. All right, let's give that one a few more seconds. Great pose, y'all. And let's switch it again. There we go. All right, and just keep rolling across your page. Now, if you start to feel like you're getting a little bit lost in all of those lines, or you want to start to, now you're starting to see the drawing and think about it in terms of its graphic qualities and how the positive and negative space is working in that drawing, as opposed to just where the body, you can start it with how much or how little you choose to draw. So in this particular drawing, I'm choosing not to draw Atticus's head at all, because I want to come down and explore this negative space that's down below. So when we go through this kind of gesture drawing, it's about being really, really selective and finding those points of attention, finding those points of tension, finding those things that are interesting to you as an artist that capture your imagination and your particular idiosyncrasies. And those things can oftentimes be quite surprising and strange. You never know where the drawing's going to go. And we'll switch it again and do one more. Last one, y'all. About another 30 seconds to finish this drawing. Great final pose. Look at that stretch. Think about the movement of the model now compressing for Atticus, stretching for Rachel, and think about how your lines are mirroring and mimicking, and how even the movement of your own body, you're feeling through that movement of the model's body. And this is something you can practice. For those of you who do go to life drawing groups or have a lot of experience life drawing, this is something that you can practice even if in the life drawing group they're doing 20-minute poses, 30-minute poses, really long, what we call sustained poses. There's no reason why you can't still explore gesture even though the pose is taking longer for the model to execute, right? Because gesture is, again, about a set of values in drawing. It's not just about the amount of time that you take to make the drawing. A few more seconds. And we're out. All right, Atticus and Rachel, excellent job, y'all. Excellent. Okay. Hopefully now, okay, you've had that experience of doing all of those different types of drawing, from the simple contour drawing to the masked in haptic drawing where you're bringing in all of that activity, to then the longer, more sustained contour where you're trying to find those convexities and those points of tension, to this kind of rapid movement drawing where you're getting a series of movements that happen across in space. I cannot believe it's almost 8 o'clock. I don't know where the time goes, y'all. All right, so let's move on then into our final drawing. And let's give ourselves a little bit of time. We're going to push a little bit past 8 o'clock. I hope that's all right with all y'all. I hope you stick with us here, because then after I'm done, I'm going to throw it back over to Shannon and the qagoma team who want to wrap things up and talk to you a little bit more here at the end. All right, so as we're thinking about this now, what I want you to think about, and the word that I want you having just vibrating there at the front of your mind, is immediacy, right? Trying to get that sense of immediacy where the viewer can look at your drawing and you can look at your own drawing and you can see your intuition, you can see your responsive drawing. Let the drawing tell you what the drawing's about. You can see that coming through. We're going to take a final pose here of about 5 minutes. I think, yeah, we can afford to do that. Let's take a final pose of 5 minutes. Let's get yourself a fresh sheet of paper. On that fresh sheet of paper, again, use the entire sheet of paper, or if you still have trouble working all the way to the edges, give yourself that frame that you can work inside so you start to think about the composition of your drawing as well. Get that fresh sheet of paper set up, and let's go for one more drawing. And I'm going to get a fresh sheet of paper set up, and I think I'm going to go with a final drawing that is going, or maybe I'll just flip this one over if that ink didn't bleed through too much. Oh, that one's got one on the back already. All right, here we go. I use this one. This one's ready. All right. And we are going to have this drawing. We are going to have Atticus and Rachel take a pose. They're going to hold that pose for about 3 minutes. Then they're going to make a very, very slight variation in that pose, and they're going to hold that slight variation for about 3 minutes. So you'll have about 6 minutes of drawing time, but it'll be divided. Now, you can choose to sort of blend those drawings together into a kind of chimera-like figure, or you can overlap them, or you can choose to draw one of them and then draw the other one. I want you to adapt and respond to it using any of those methods that we've explored so far. So either that slow contour, that massing together and haptic drawing, the overlapping, rapid overlapping drawing, or that strong contour with the sense of tension in it. Choose any any one of those methods you want. I'm going to go with my marker again for this one, and I'm going to do focus on that strong contour. All right, and I'm going to begin again this time by giving myself a frame to work within. Okay, again, it's a good habit. If you've never used that trick before, try it so that you have those edges. It's also because I've got a giant sheet of paper. All right, great pose. All right, has everybody got that? Beautiful. We're going to go about 3 minutes. Then they're going to make a slight movement, and we'll go about 3 minutes again. All right, everybody ready? And let's begin. I'll try to stay over here out of the way. So. All right, you're about halfway there before we move. And if you're like me, you really want to play with that frame. So if you did give yourself a frame, again, think about how you're relating all of your marks to that frame. Again, try to think, be inventive, have a go at it. It might not work, but better to have a beautiful fiasco than to play it safe. All right, you've got about 30 more seconds on this one. Great pose, y'all. All right, let's do a very, very slight alteration now. So Atticus and Rachel are going to do a very slight movement, and then you're going to continue drawing into the same drawing again. Now you can overlap. You can choose to add some more body parts to the drawing that you've already done, overlap it completely, move over to the second figure. If you did only one figure, you choose. Be inventive, be, again, responsive, use your intuition, right? Try to get your rational brain out of the way. All right, I'm using the strategy here where I drew Rachel first, and now I'm going over to draw Atticus up above. But I'm going to draw him right off the right side of my frame. Nice. All right, y'all. You've got about a minute left. Finish this up. In your final minute, think about your drawing, look at your drawing, think about what's important in your drawing, and come and try to really emphasize that. All right, give it that final minute. And we're out. All right. It is customary always at the end of a life drawing session, wherever you are, to thank our models. Bravo. Well done, Rachel and Atticus. Beautiful. All right, I know that was a very, very quick hour. It's appropriate for gesture drawing. These things always fly by for me. There's 100 more things that I want to say, but we're going to have to call it quits there because we're already after 8 o'clock. Look, next week is the final one in this series. We're coming right up to the contemporary life drawing. So in the first one, we really focused on 19th century life drawing. In this one, we're looking at that post-war gestural life drawing. In the final one, Unruly bodies, we'll be looking at the way that the body and identity have impacted life drawing, and especially the way that performance and studies of performance have impacted life drawing. So next week, we'll be doing some very different things in terms of life drawing, and some very different things that bring in performance elements. And I'm going to be showing you a really interesting approach to drawing and teaching you a new technique too. So I hope everybody can come back and join me next Thursday for the final in this draw along series. Thank you so much for joining me in my studio tonight. I know there are a few trains going by this evening. I heard a few freight trains. Hopefully that wasn't too loud for you on your end. But this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Atticus. Thank you, Rachel. And we will see everybody next week. Thanks, y'all.